Hello, everyone. Welcome to the ISSA webinar for July 26th, The Art of Identifying Skills Gaps, How to Future-Proof Your IT Team. My name is Margaret Toscano with ISSA International, and I'll be your facilitator for today. I'd like to thank you all for joining, as well as thank our sponsor, ACI Learning, for their generous support of today's presentation. If you're not yet a member of ISSA International, please visit issa.org to learn more about the benefits of membership. During today's presentation, we would like to encourage you to ask questions of our speakers. To ask a question, please type your question in the question area of your screen. We will monitor all questions and ask them where appropriate throughout the presentation, as well as during a Q&A segment at the end, time permitting. After today's event, a recorded version of the webcast will be available on the ISSA web conference page, and you will also be given the opportunity to print a viewing certificate on BrightTalk that you can submit for continuing education credits. Now, I'm pleased to introduce today's moderator, Alex Groman. Alex is founder of Seeker Consulting and a member of the ISSA International Board of Directors. He is a longtime member of ISSA, including being president of the Northern Virginia chapter for 3 years. And Alex is also a member of the ISSA Honor Roll. Welcome, Alex. I'll now turn things over to you.
Good day, everybody. I'll follow ISSA members. So thank you. I think we're going to have a nice little discussion here today. I think we have a lot of relevant topic here. When luckily we have two experts to be able to discuss this topic of the skills gap shortage in our industry. I think everybody on this call is already understanding what has seen the statistics in terms of the skills gap and what we need. A lot of the challenges is our industry is not that old. It's relatively young, and the people who did start this off in the the 70s and 80s, they're getting to the point where they're retiring. We haven't been able to replenish them nearly as much as we have, and yet as the demand has flourished, we have not been able to keep pace. So some of those skills gaps are really trying to how do we articulate the problem, and how do we move upon that to where we can actually get to a fully staffed group of professionals from our industry. So, the universities are challenged because they're having trouble with the curriculum, trying to keep up. There's not as quickly able to change the curriculum to the changing needs of technology because our demand changes so much. Yet the skills gap seems to be growing. So from there, we're going to look at it. We're going to look at the problem from a couple of different perspectives. One is going to be the long-term learning. One's going to be the short-term learning. So today we have Sin-Ming Liu of Boise State. And then we also have Don Pezet of ACI Learning. So we are very pleased to have these two experts in the field to be able to address these things at a fundamental level, but also go into a deep dive. So with that, I think I'd like to go ahead and start off with some of the most basic things and make sure we're all on the same page. How do we really define a skills gap? I think that's something that we should put on the table here. So I'm going to start it off with for our two panelists. How do you define skills gap, and what are some of the nuances of that? So I'm going to open that up as the first basic topic here.
Thanks, Alex. And I'll dive in on this one. There's a few different ways to look at what a skills gap is, but at its most basic, it's just where there is some skill or technique that you need your team to have, and no one on the team has it. That, typically an IT department is not run by a single person. It's run by a group of people, and we count on each of them to bring different skills and different aspects of the trade into the team to cover all of our bases. But oftentimes there's things that get overlooked, an individual skill, an individual technique, some piece of knowledge that maybe a former employee had and they retired and it's now gone. Somebody left for another organization. Now you've lost that skill. Or maybe just the team never had it in the first place. You see that with startups a lot. They have an initial group of people, and what we always said is they don't know what they don't know, right? They don't even realize that there's this skill that's missing. So those are some examples of skills gaps as I see them out in the workplace.
All right. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Don. So since I'm a professor, I get to look at things from a little different perspective. Mm-hmm. And I completely see what Don was saying. And I would like to add on to that is it is not just a personal skill level, whether it's an employee or future employee, it is also the organization too. Is we could see as people called it or say, I think they called it as the organization maturity. And a group of employee, a team as a whole, how well are they good at taking care of the organization needs? But I also have a different perspective too, is in terms of gap is what the educational institution, whether it's a 2-year or 4-year school or the master and PhD, what they graduated versus what the workforce needs. And there's usually a skill, there's usually a gap. The question is how close the gap is, because the closer the gap is, the organization who hire them does not need to spend as much time. And again, time is money in terms of training them to get the gap to meet what they need. So, and
Sure.
again, different organizations need different things. And the question is also is, are their needs actually, are they able to meet their needs based on what they're going to be able to hire, for example, right out of college? So I think Don and I can go on and on about this. So
Yeah, I think a lot of organizations, a lot of universities, even they act under the knowledge that they've got, right? The information that we've got, and we've got to build programs around that. We've got to build departments around that, and oftentimes things get overlooked, and that really reared its head a couple of years ago. I'd probably say 5 or 6 years ago, when it came to like end user security awareness, that you had people throughout a company that we traditionally didn't think of as part of our cybersecurity posture. And then all of a sudden you fast forward to today where like everyone in a company is under attack. You're constantly getting phishing emails. You're getting social engineering phone calls and things. And people need to be trained so they have some basic awareness. Otherwise they become the weakest link. And that's how an attacker gets foothold into your network. And we didn't think that way 10 years ago, but today we do. There's a whole new set of skills that we expect everyone to have.
Yeah, and I like to add on from the educational institution from that perspective is that when a program get put in place, right, and you hire those faculty, and in some way that when you hire them to be full-time, right, they lost that connection to the industry, and things stay stagnant, and higher ed or education in general don't change at all or change really slowly. And that's why when you're going to see some of the new creative, really innovative program come online, right? When they come online, they hit the right note at the beginning, but hopefully they continue to keep innovating. If you do not keep innovating, looking at what the needs are and what the gaps are, and keep adding and modifying a curriculum to meet that needs in the short term or long term, right? You're going to be obsolete. And trust me, there are a lot of IT program and cybersecurity program out there. It feels like everybody teach the same sets of curriculum, right? And they are not. How are you differentiating yourself? And what are your graduated? Are you really giving them the skills for them to be successful? And so there's a lot of technical skill and soft skill, and I think we're going to be able to get to that at a later as this conversation progresses.
Sure. Okay. Perfect. And I think that's good in the kind of the opening salvo for a couple of the questions. So, for me, I'd like to always kind of look at the who, what, when, where, how, kind of thing. But, again, there's a lot of why there's such a skills gap. And one, I think that kind of always strikes me as kind of odd is that they're saying that we're losing a lot of the younger professionals that are going to be filling at least the cybersecurity jobs to other job choices, which again always kind of boggles me, because you talk to some kid, they're like, oh, I want to do cyber, I want to be able to do all this, and it's kind of the buzzword. So, but it's kind of fascinating to me that saying, hey, we're losing quite a bit of skilled professionals to other types of jobs. I'd like to be able to get some comments from you and see, like, why is that, and what can we do? Again, it seems like it's the sexy thing to do. Oh, I'm in cyber, even though most of us know a lot of it's really, more of the government's risk and compliance parts of cyber, but not everybody's at the keyboard hacking into things. But, why are we losing some of those skilled professionals to other positions? Can you guys comment on that?
So I have a couple of thoughts on it. And one of them is, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Peter principle, the idea that people get promoted up until they reach a point where they're no longer capable of doing what they're supposed to do, right? You promote them beyond their abilities. That we have better training today than we've ever had before, that universities across the country, across the world have cybersecurity programs. They didn't have that before, right? So if you wanted to be a pen tester, there used to be no formal pathway for that. So you had to get out and start at the bottom and work your way up slowly to get there. Today, people can jump right into that role. And then if they're good at it, if they're really good at it, they're highly sought after. So they get poached by other companies or they get promoted up out of those positions. And we don't have people working up from the bottom anymore. We depend on our university system as like the feeder league, right? To send us candidates to get them out into the workforce. And it's just changed the way that we recruit people to fill those positions. And when we don't fill a position, that's when you end up with a skills gap. You end up with something that your organization absolutely needs, but you don't have the right person or the right talent in there to fill that.
Good point. Good point.
The is the what am I saying here is your personality and job role, and your personality and also the targeted job role. I think it needs to match well. If not, you're gonna start losing people. So hiring right is one thing. So and then the in terms of the what am I saying here is the I come from this is really truly, I live in higher ed, right? I live in such a wide spectrum. I came from engineering background, especially trained in electrical engineering and computer engineering, right? Trust me, we lose even more in that area than cybersecurity. At least cybersecurity in some way is sexy, right?
Yeah, at least we got that going for us.
Yeah, you got a lot of press for. We got a lot of press in cybersecurity, and we have and we have a lot of press and always people talking about how many cybersecurity jobs are out there, how well paying, but sometimes we don't talk about the realistic job of cybersecurity too. Is they think it's all sexy, right? But some of it is grunt work, some of it is long hour work, and some of it is gonna drive you to the ground. So that's the reason why I say that matching up the personality, and there are two things you guys, everyone probably, a lot of people probably heard about the Myers-Briggs, right? In terms of personality trait. But recently, I also learned about the 6 types of working genius. Six type of working genius. I believe that's correct. Is how do you fit? And then this loop back to what Don exactly said, right? You get promoted. It's like you really like that certain type of work, right? When you get promoted to now, I have to manage a group.
I like this one thing, but I don't want it. I want to be my little silo.
Yeah, exactly. I said, I don't like to do that, but because you don't like to manage people, it doesn't mean that you can do it, but you don't like it, and it quickly will drive you to the ground.
Yeah.
So
it's a skill set shortage. It just moved over. You like this, but now I got to do this on top of that because I moved up.
Yep.
And that's something that we can actually fix inside of companies, right? A lot of people feel like they have to get a promotion to be moving in the right trajectory for their career, right? If I have the same job title for 10 years, I must be a failure. And that's just not true. And if you look at the skill set needed, I'll use pen testers as an example. The skill set needed for a pen tester is very different from a person managing a team. If you're managing a team, you have to do employee reviews, disciplinary procedures, hiring, interviewing, all these different things.
Motivation.
A pen tester doesn't need to do. So companies can fix that by defining multiple tiers of a single job title. So you might have, the US government does a great job of this, where you might have a cybersecurity analyst 1, analyst 2, analyst 3. And that way people can get promoted based on their experience, tenure, skills, but they're still applying that trade that they know and love. And they're not feeling that need, like, I've got to become a manager. I've got to move into this other job role to be successful.
Sure.
Yep. So that's why I see it as some of the more mature or larger international national company, they have 2 different track of promotion track, right? You can stay on the technical track, or you say that, hey, I love my technical training, but I see myself growing into, I really enjoy the management part. They move into the different management track. So in general, because a lot of cybersecurity company in some way hasn't matured. They tends to be smaller. They don't have that kind of pathway. They tends to, hey, you're really good, and now we need to you to manage a group of people, and sometimes that does not work well at all.
And I can always imagine that's too, it brings up a great point with the two paths. You can either go like a management path or an architecture path, but this is also a fear that I've seen that, the turnover rate that most of the people in technology move companies before they really get along those paths. So some of that can be a challenge too. And again, when we're talking about the management path and having to manage people, it becomes a whole nother skills gap that we don't even say. So excellent point. So what I like to do is kind of go down, and now that we, the kind of the, why it's there, but maybe we can drill down a little bit more into those specific skills gap that you guys are seeing, or what did you experience? Maybe we can go drill down another different layer. So if we could talk about it more about the what now. And I'm sorry, I'm not sure which one I want to be able to figure out which thing. So
how about me?
Dan, you want to take that one first this time?
I'll go first. And when I actually started a new program called Cyber Operation and Resilience, is asynchronous online degree. The reason why we went down that way is because I came from engineering background, right? We were trying to teach engineer to understand cybersecurity, and one thing leads to another. We realized that the university or college program does not actually teach the operational sides of the program. So in real world cybersecurity, yes, pen testing is important. You don't want to know how many students come to me. All they want to do is, I want to be a pen tester. I was like, we need them, but what kind of pen tester do you want to be? But it led us to, we are not even teaching the basic of risk assessment and risk management. Okay, so, and then it got us to think about, you know what? We actually need our graduate to understand system thinking, understanding how pieces fits, so that the solution and wherever they realize where the problems are and the solution, they are applying and spending the money at the right places. So I'll kick that off and let Dawn jump in and see where this conversation goes.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like in a general sense, those are issues that people are up against. If we want to go like really fine grained, though, really specific, there are a couple of areas that I see in a number of companies that I've talked to over the years. Probably one of the biggest ones, in my opinion, is business resumption plans, or implementing or executing a business resumption plan. So if you go to a company and you go into their IT department and you say, do you guys have a plan for what happens if disaster strikes, right? So you have a disaster, you've got to recover from it. Do you have a plan? Yes. Okay. How many people in your team are trained on what they need to do under that BRP to follow those steps, to go through it? What does it take? There was one company, I'll give you a real example, where every day they were shipping tapes offsite to Iron Mountain. Iron Mountain was a huge provider of offsite storage, very reliable company. So thumbs up, green check mark for that decision. And I said, okay, how do you call Iron Mountain to get a tape when you need it? Oh, the phone number's in the contract. Where's the contract, right? Imagine a disaster hits. You want that as fast as you can. And here you are digging for a contract to find a phone number to call. No one had ever gone through the process of calling to retrieve a tape, right? It hadn't occurred. You got to go through.
Most of us don't like doing processes or procedure documentation, right? It's not the sexy part of the job.
Yeah, I add on to that point is that there's somebody say that, oh, we got all our plan are all on Google Drive, and your first tabletop exercise is power is out.
Yeah, real life scenario.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's
tons of other examples we could do. Another favorite of mine is centralized logging, right? You go to any organization that has even one security professional, and they know we need centralized logging. We need a SIEM in place with our logs. But then what are you doing with the data once it's there? You've collected all this information on your network. What kind of analysis are you doing of the data? Well, I don't know. Regulatory compliance says I have to have centralized logging. I check that box. It doesn't say I have to do anything with it, right? And that's a skill. That is a borderline art when you talk about data analysis like that. But it's a skill someone needs to have in the organization.
in some way, there is a gap that we don't cover so well in the in higher ed or in academia, right? For example, students will be collecting a lot of experimental data. They collect data, and some of the analysis that they make is pretty surface level. They don't go down and looking at, hey, this is actually a few step back. This is actually what we need to be thinking about.
Mhm.
So, and partially we have academia has something to do with it too. We didn't do a job on teaching them because a lot of students, they are scared of statistics, and they're too scared of some of the math that is necessary to make sense of the data. And the cool thing is, like tools like Splunk and a lot of tools are out there, and for you to be able to run script, but able to run script and to get the answer, and guess what? To be able to communicate it, the answer to the management or to your team lead to know, hey, this is something that we need to be paying attention to. So I think that the communication skill and interpersonal skill, and guess what? We call it soft skill and professional skill. Those are really important too. Is because guess what? You can go get a job. The question is how long can you keep it and not people hating you to like or not liking working with you, right? Right.
Unfortunately, so those soft skills are a key point. And absolutely, that kind of drives one of the questions here we got from the audience here. Having someone who's going to be like, wow, I'm really good at analysis, or hey, I'd rather just look at logs all day. I don't want to put my headphones on and listen to my music, but I want to look at the logs. Or hey, I'd rather be in front of a group of people presenting. Or hey, put me in front of the C-suite. I'm good with this, and you're confident with them. But it takes a while to be able to understand exactly what skill sets you have in house. And this kind of brings back to your point that we were mentioning the Myers-Briggs, and then you also you mentioned the Peter principle. But are there what other types of personality traits and what kind of other types of tools are there to determine what a job role an applicant would be best suited for? And that's one of the questions we have from the audience. What are some of those tests or opportunities that we might have that are skill to be able to really leverage the team as best we can?
I have differing opinions on this because I hate aptitude and attitude tests and Myers-Briggs. And there's the one that assigns everybody a color, like, oh, I'm a blue, you're a green. Here's how we're supposed to talk to each other. I get frustrated with a lot of those. I feel like the number one tool here is a face-to-face interview. When you're recruiting somebody, when you're hiring a new employee, sit down and talk to them. Can you have a conversation with them? Give them a sample. Say, all right, we're running out of bandwidth on our internet connection, or whatever our WAN link is. Pretend I'm the CEO. Explain that problem to me, and then hear how they go through it. Like, just give them something to explain, and you can gauge very quickly how well somebody can communicate. And communication is probably, of all the skills in IT, is probably the hardest one to learn. There are some people that just have a hard time communicating, and it's tough to overcome that. That's why universities have classes like speech, and there's groups like Toastmasters and all that to help people communicate, because it's a challenging skill.
Thank you, Don. I mentioned those, right? I think it's a good measurement of who somebody is, but I'm sorry to say, some of those stuff cannot be taught. You cannot take a class and be good at it, okay? I'm going to tell you a story, but don't worry. When you give a professor a mic, right, you got to be careful. He may never give it back, but I'll keep this short. Two things: reading the room. When you have somebody start talking or start presenting, right, is this person reading the room to know whether he's actually presenting or connecting to the audience? And then the second thing that I want to talk about is the reason why you can teach that on some of the soft skill sets. Right? I'm going to tell you this. I have been in academia for 20 years. You want to know the skill set that I'm still using today is when I was an undergraduate student, I did a summer of door-to-door sales. In the middle of summer, 90 degree and probably 90% humidity, you're going to learn sales pretty quick. Is because you're going to need to learn quickly how to communicate with people and how to make a sales. And what is it that you need to do to make a sale the minimum thing is you just got to continue to knock on a door, because sales will happen. It will take care of itself if you knock in enough doors. And then there's another motivation that I did what I did is because I want to get out of heat. When you get into the houses, there's air conditioning, right? So I want to tell you the skill sets of sales and door-to-door sales that I did in one of those summers in the 90s. That is still the most useful tools that I have in my tool chest today. It's not even technical anymore. So
yeah. Excellent. And again, I think you bring up a good point, actually interviewing people, talking to them, learning these other skills. But, again, for this audience, there's another kind of a question, is there an industry like a skills gap assessment checklist or processes that we might be able to hand? Is that something you guys are familiar with that might be able to talk to, like, hey, we realize what you guys are saying is great, but where's the NIST standard for the gap skills gap checklist? Do you guys have any comments on that?
Yeah, there's a couple of different ones that are out there, but the big one you sort of touched on is NIST. NIST has
I think I went for everything.
The nice workforce roles, the cybersecurity workforce roles. If you just Google that, I don't have the URL handy, but NIST nice cybersecurity workforce roles. They have defined some, I think it's like 41 job roles and the skills associated with each. And they've done a really thorough job of it, like NIST always does. And, there might be one skill that's tied to all 41 workforce roles, but then there's others that are more unique based on the role. So they've done a really good job. If you're just looking for a straight up checklist, that's where I would start.
Start with the NIST, huh?
I think there's another one out there is CMMI. CMMI. And I actually have another job, a third job, or a third of my job. I actually have a joint appointment with Idaho National Lab. Idaho National Lab has done a lot of work in cybersecurity, especially in critical infrastructure, right? They had some publication and some work related to maturity model too at the personal level and also at the organization level. But I don't think they have released a tool on that. But I think CMMI or NITS, the the nice cybersecurity framework is probably the top two.
Okay, great ones out there. So, that's one. A checklist is always good, but from your perspective, what are some of the what are some of the solutions that you guys are seeing from that? Maybe let's turn the topic on, straight up solutions for this problem. And this is where it's really going to be able to bring, each of your backgrounds and where you're coming from. But, how is that, what's maybe break it down to two parts. What's the longer term solution? What's the shorter term solution for addressing this skills gap?
Okay. Siming, you want to go first?
You want to go first, Don?
Okay. So there's a few different approaches on this, and we'll talk about how it is now and how it's going to be in the future, right? So right now, a lot of times organizations lean on certifications, and they say, all right, if I'm going to hire a pen tester, let me go see what pen testing certifications are out there. I'll make that a requirement for the job. There we go, done. That's how I'm going to assess people. Or if I'm hiring on the help desk, maybe it's something like CompTIA A+, Net+, or if I'm hiring for my sysadmin team, it's a Microsoft cert. They kind of pick based on whatever vendors it is they deal with, and they go with those. The challenge with those certifications, they're all good certifications, right? They prove you have knowledge in a particular area. They're usually, with the exception of CompTIA, they're usually pretty vendor focused. If I do a Cisco exam, it's going to be how Cisco is telling me to configure a Cisco firewall. And then I go work somewhere and they've got Palo Alto firewalls, right? So half the knowledge carries over, right? A firewall is a firewall, but there's a lot of extra stuff that I learned that now doesn't apply, right? It's extra skills that I'm not going to be able to leverage, or skills that I'm missing because I haven't worked with that vendor. And so the solution that we have in place today is not perfect. And it's got a well-known blind spot, but people know that, and we work around it, and we just know we have to train people when we hire them, regardless of what their experience is going to be. Going forward in the future, organizations are working to move away from that reliance on certifications. Certifications aren't going away, but as that being like the sole arbiter, that's what's going away. And now focusing on, let's test their skills as well. Let's focus on, don't necessarily write the command for creating a firewall rule, but describe the process of blocking egress traffic to a web server, or identifying command and control traffic on a network. more general, focused around a skill as opposed to a particular vendor. It's just flipping around the way that we assess somebody's knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And the nice part about a newer model like this, certifications are really handy when you're hiring somebody. They're not so handy anymore once you've hired somebody, now they're in that job role. Versus a skill, we can constantly be assessing somebody against a skill, even when they're in the job role, to make sure they're maintaining the readiness, but also to gauge their preparedness for moving into other positions or promotions and so on. So that's where I see the future of all of this going. Would you agree with that, Sinming?
Yes, I love it. It's called competency from it's those academia like to use big words. I hate big words, but that's what people use. But I see a short-term and long-term solution, exactly what Don said in terms of certification. Certification is a good baseline. But guess what? Knowing how to do something doesn't know you know how to do it well or know how to communicate well, right? So I really believe in teaching learner or kids or student how to learn, because once you teach them how to learn, how to research it, right, they will always be able to adapt into, I know this, I need to do that, I don't know how to do that, how can I get there, right? So you show them, it's like, hey, a map is wonderful thing. You know where your starting point is, you know where you're going to end up. How you're going to get there is really up to you. And I'm famous for not following the map because sometimes I think the algorithm is stupid. But anyway, I use that S word. But I also have one thing called, let's look at this way. If we don't have enough cybersecurity workforce, right, which I work really closely with Idaho National Lab to be able to help me do the curriculum design and to help produce more capable. And is we got to work with community colleges. Community colleges needed to update and change their curriculum, and community colleges are really good in giving kids and student hands-on experience. And the 4-year school needed to look at that. Let's not be too picky on those classes and help them transfer and help them complete a degree and teach them how to learn. So curriculum design is a huge thing. And the tendency is we are always behind the curve in terms of curriculum design. We are always doing things that is outdated. But more importantly, in a practical perspective, is the internship and the apprenticeship. So the company needed to invest in that. Is because if you make investment, you bring in a potential candidate, right? You're thinking about a 3-month, a whole year, or 2-year interview, right? Before you actually make a long-term commitment to a student or to an employee or to a kids, right? And you get them, but so internship and apprenticeship, and then you say that, wait, you're going to lose that student. Okay, guess what? You actually wanted to hire people that you can lose rather than people that you can lose, right? For the long-term growth of a company and the health of the company, so you can do more exciting and creating stuff and to help your business grow.
Yep. You know, that brings me a good point, and kind of circling back to the skills assessment. You know, you're mentioning like the curriculum for the community colleges and the other schools and things like that. But, you know, there's still a lot of workforce that are still trying to figure out, how do I get in there? The people who may not have already had gone through a specific curriculum or learned those things. You know, how do you test somebody's aptitude if they haven't even taken, you know, step number one? If they've never been to a community college, maybe they're coming out of high school, they're like, wow, you know, I really don't know if I'm better to be a coder, or if I'm going to be able to be, a firewall administrator, or if I'm going to be someone who's going to be, really good with writing controls. How do you get some of those skills assessments before they even start on there, before they have the on-ramp? I hear it all the time, like, how do I get my kid to get on there in cybersecurity, which normally it's like, when I was growing up, you learn, technology first and then cyber on top of that, but the skills gap is so shortage. We might need people to be able to just go directly in. But how do we assess that? Says, hey, look, you're going to be really good at firewall. You're going to be really good at programming. You're going to be able to do, DevSecOps. How do we judge those people before they even get into the pipeline? We've been talking a little bit before when they're already in there, but how do we get them before they get to that point? Do you have any comments on that?
You want me to go first, Non?
Yeah, sure.
I certainly do, but let me tell you, if we these days, the thing that I really hate the most is we ask kids what they like, right? They haven't done anything. They haven't tried. You got to try. There's so much free resources out there, the Code Academy. There's so much free site and try hack me, hack the box with all that stuff, right? Is you got to go try to see what you like. And then go find an internship. Is that what you want to do? Are you going to commit 40 hours of your life per week in the foreseeable future to be able to do that particular thing? So you got to I don't think there's a right test. You could try this, whether you can have a test or assessment, but people needs to try. Give it a try. Go take a class. Go take a short-term training, and then with ACI or with Coursera or with whatever site they are, you got to give it a try.
Yeah, the U.S. military actually has a really good approach to this. Most of you are probably familiar with the ASVAB exam that U.S. high school students take. It's a general aptitude battery that you take, and based on the results, they get an idea of the types of careers that you'd be fit for, right? That based on your knowledge and the inclinations that you have, and try and fit you into the right career. It's not perfect. It's not an exact science by any means, and you are certainly welcome to pick whatever career you want to be in. That's the joy of having choice like we do. But inside of the world of IT, we don't really have an equivalent of that. And that's something we've been working on at ACI Learning with our Insights program, is basically what you described, Alex, the ability for somebody to come in and let's give them a general exam, an assessment they go through to assess their skills, and then show them, here's the areas where you're strong and here's the areas where you're weak. Now, when you see a weak area, what you do with that is up to you. Maybe that means that's not the career for you. Like, oh, I'm weak on databases, I better stay away from that.
Oh, yeah.
Or you see, wait, here's an area I need to focus on so that I can be ready for the career that I want to go into. But people need to know. People need to understand where to focus, because otherwise they waste their time studying all sorts of things that may not be what they really need to spend their time on. People tend to drift in the areas that they're good at, that they already understand, and neglect the areas that they are weak in.
But well, thanks to Don, I don't have anything that fancy. Being an educator, this is what I believe in. Is I think what we need is an education or a degree in education pathway is what I call stackable, right? You take a class, for example, you take a fundamental cybersecurity class, you understand the big picture of what cybersecurity is about. Then you take an offensive security class, you take a defensive security class, and then you take a forensic class. Those are completely three different things right there, right? In terms of cybersecurity. So I say, which one do you like more? Then you started to gravitate towards a particular one of them. But you know what? I also believe in this. There's a potential as you grow in terms of professional, your mindset and skill sets will change. So the thing is, you're going to need to be adaptable, and knowing how to learn, I think, is still the most important thing. Yeah. And if you know how to learn, you can adapt into anything. Guess what? If you know how to adapt and learn, right? Yeah. And you probably do not have to face the possibility of layoff when there's a cut coming, and you probably can survive pretty well. So,
yep. And it brings me to a good point. Thank you, guys. And kind of getting back to where we're saying, hey, for the on ramp for the people trying to get into the field, people that are on there. But sometimes we're missing like the managers, the cybersecurity managers, and really like, hey, look, how do I hone my skills? I need to be able to learn finance, I need to be able to those. How do you see that skills gap, and where's, for cybersecurity managers, a lot of them we got here tooth and nail because, hey, look, this is a new job title. This company has never had one. How do you see that with that growth for cybersecurity management? Where is that going, and where are some of the key things those skills that, people have been on the field and have the gray hair, how do we guide them in that direction? Where are those gaps?
You're exactly right in that it's important and it's new for a lot of organizations. If they just hired their first CISO, if they didn't have dedicated security employees before, they're operating kind of behind the eight ball. They got to ramp up quickly. And there's two skills that they absolutely have to nail day one as soon as they can. The first one, incident response, is what do we do when we have a cybersecurity incident, right? Because if you didn't have a cybersecurity team before, then the odds are you've already had an incident, and you're going to you'll find out any day now. So you need to be ready Incident response is like a number one skill. And then the second thing, regulatory compliance. Right now, like if you're a United States-based company, there's very few regulations that govern how you manage IT, but that's changing. And if you're in other countries, there's already regulations in place. Like the EU has been very progressive on this and getting regulations in place. So regardless of where you are, you're either having to deal with it now or you will be dealing with it soon. So if you've never heard of ISO 27001, if you've never heard of SOC 2 and GDPR and all these things, they absolutely govern how you manage your team, how you respond to security incidents, how you communicate out to your customers, to your users, to your shareholders. That's a critical skill of anybody who's going into cybersecurity management.
Well, I think we lost Alex and Don. I think you and I running this ourselves now. So
all rules out the window.
Yes, everything goes. So I appreciate it, Don. I would only wanted to add on two things is the communication and knowing the teams that you have and the skill sets of the team that you have. I think is a key, because if you're a new person joining your organization, right? If you do not know where the teams are and where the companies are, it's not going to go well, because when you join anything new, you got a honeymoon period. You better put some stuff in place quick. And if you want to take something apart, you probably want to take it apart quick too, because then you got a honeymoon period. You can enjoy it and take it apart. So Alex, we were thinking that you were gone and we're just going to run with this.
Sorry. The miracle of forgetting your power cord at home. My apologies, everybody. So, but yeah, that's thank you guys. And I apologize if we've missed that. So we had a couple of other good questions here coming in. I want to pop in there, but one of them is, a straight LMS. Someone's coming in there like, hey, or they're good LMS for tracking initiatives and things like that. Or I know you guys probably deal with that, and that's kind of a very specific question, but I thought I could throw that out there as a quick one. Is there something you guys can do that?
Is the question on LMS, learning management
systems
of a project tracking?
Right. So if you're a manager, which ones are the ones you're really going to be saying, hey, here's good to be able to look at? Because again, we mentioned out the NIST and the other skills gap, if they want to have a good way, or some of the ones that LMS that we might be able to offer that you guys worked with. I'm not sure if you can throw out a couple of names out there that you like.
Yeah, I'll try and be unbiased. So just to be upfront real quick, ACI Learning, we have our own LMS, right? It's our proprietary developed system, and we can track progress. If you assign courses or episodes, we can track it. That's a really important thing of whatever LMS you pick. So not saying you have to use ours, but it's really good. But there are plenty of other ones that are out there. There are open source solutions like Moodle, which is, it looks like 1995 called, but it's very functional. It's free. There are paid solutions out there like Blackboard and Canvas and other ones. The main thing that you're looking for, though, is exactly what the question stated, is you've got to be able to track initiatives. You got to be able to set expiration dates. You have to say, I want this person to watch this training or participate in this course, and they need to do it by this date. And if they don't, I need to be aware of that and be able to report on it. So we have that in our LMS because we use it for our end user security awareness, right? Let's say you work at a company with 10,000 people and you need all 10,000 of them to complete the security awareness training. Mm-hmm. You've got to have a way to track that. So our LMS does it. Several of the other ones that are out there on the market do as well. I think Canvas and Blackboard are probably the two biggest LMSs, but they're really focused more towards schools, universities, that kind of a market. In the business world, you'll see people partnering with organizations like Skillsoft that bring a whole collection of content into their LMS and provide it, or companies like ACI Learning.
Yeah, I'll add on to what Don mentioned that I've been in academia for 20 years. Within that first 18 years, right? And I used Blackboard once, and then I quit using until 18 years later because it was so bad. Okay? But then we switched to Canvas. It was a lot better, but in some way, it is still the old school ways of learning management system. I believe the ability to track the ability, sometimes English doesn't show up come out correctly. Okay. So the ability to track employee training and what they have achieved is really important. So we use Canvas. I like it a lot, and I probably run 15 to 20 classes on that system in any given semester.
Perfect.
It could be, yeah. So it works well.
And that's great, because you do need to get the arms around, how do we handle these things, which actually kind of brings up to another question. I'll go back to the original thoughts of, with the skills gap, someone brought up the question, is this really more people looking at this as an organizational, thing, or is it really more specific down at an individual level because of the cyber? But, skills gap can apply to many things, but are you guys seeing it being attacked at more of an organizational level, or is it very much department level or individual? How do you guys see that with some of the research you hear from industry or from companies or agencies? How do you look at that? Is it more broad, or is it a little bit more focused?
I think it's at all two level. At a personal level is because of the employee growth, right? Because if you wanted to keep employee, you're going to need to help employee growth and then get them to training that they need for them to be better at doing their job. So, and then the other thing is actually when you put together whoever you have as a team in a company, right? The maturity and also the team skill sets of your company is going to determine whether your company survive or not survive in the short term and long term. So I see it as two things.
Okay, great. So, and again, I think we talked a little bit more about, actually performing a real skills gap analysis. I mean, we can go a little bit more of a deep dive from there, some of the benefits that we see from those for that skills gap. But, that would give a foundation for an organization to realize, okay, here's where it is. But, if you guys can maybe talk about a little bit more, what are some of those benefits we're going to see from this, performing that such an analysis? And then, once we have them, how do you kind of turn a pivot from there? The traditional certifications are not always a good, not the be all end all to end those gaps, but there's got to be some solutions that we place when we come out those skills gaps. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that, some of the benefits.
Sure. There's a number of benefits, and I could go with the vague benefits of, hey, employees who are trained better, work harder, and have greater output. Your network will be more stable, and so on. That's all nebulous stuff. So if we want to hit like a real tangible benefit, I can give a great example, which is cybersecurity insurance. Most companies, most businesses these days carry some kind of cybersecurity insurance. If you have an incident, the insurance company is immediately going to evaluate whether you did your due diligence. Did you do the minimum? Did you follow industry best practices? Because if you didn't, like if your admin account's password was the word password, they're not going to pay out on that policy, right? Like you were negligent and that's not the insurance company's fault. They're not going to pay you. They're going to deny the claim.
Yeah.
Well, we need to prove that we did our industry best practices, that we at least did our due diligence. And that means proving, one, that our network is up to a certain level, which is what certifications like the ISO 27001 certify, is that you are following industry best practices. And then two, that our employees are competent, that they are trained in all these different areas, and that our end users have been trained in basic phishing awareness and other things. We need a way to be able to assess that and show it. And that's where skills gap analysis comes in. So those are tangible, real benefits right there. The difference between whether your insurance claim is covered or declined comes down to whether or not you can prove you did your due diligence.
I really don't have much to add, but what I wanted to say is that once you've done the analysis, right, you better be finding the resources, meaning the money to actually put it to work and actually close the gap. And sometimes you know how it is we could be completing a risk assessment, a risk management report, right?
Yeah.
And then next year you did another assessment, but say there was no work done but in the last 11 months. Yeah. So what is it? What resources are you putting forward to make sure that the gap actually gotten closed? So sure. There's always a mismatch somewhere. So the question is, somebody hopefully will be responsible for closing that gap.
Sure. And those gaps, there's several different ways you can use those, self-assessments, spreadsheets, interviews, traditional assessments, performance assessments. They're all different types. But, if someone's just now saying like, wow, I realize I've got a skills gap and I want to be able to do this, I want to start with some interviews, some assessments, how does someone get going on some of that? You guys can talk a little bit, like, how do you formulate those, those metrics, and how do you get some of those tools in house? Can you talk towards that?
Yeah, right now it's a kind of a budding industry. So there's not a lot of solutions that are out there on the market that let somebody go out and immediately assess these. So
Mm-hmm.
referring back to something I mentioned earlier about like the NICE framework, that
Mm-hmm.
it really is basically a checklist that you look at it and you say, all right, I want to be a pen tester. So let me go through and find that job role in the NIST NICE framework and read the requirements. And that's going to tell me where I need to focus. Now, if I don't qualify for a pen tester right now, that doesn't mean I don't qualify for any job. I could look at the other titles and see what I qualify for today. All right, now I can go get employment, but then
Mm-hmm.
I can be working towards what I want to then go and become that pen tester one day, right? To set up that pathway. Now, if you go to just about any university in America, if you go to organizations like mine, we typically have career pathways, ways that lay out, here's the things that you need to go through in order to be qualified for this job. And you might be able to take an assessment to like in the universities, they have the CLEP exam. You can CLEP out of something so you don't have to take a course.
Yeah.
You might already have those skills to be able to skip a course or two. But you highlight the areas that you need to be able to get there. I think we're going to see a lot of new tools emerging in the next couple of years to help people address that, especially in terms of human resources departments. They need a better way to gauge candidates coming in to get the right people in the right jobs.
Mm-hmm.
I want to add one thing. Having a mentor and having somebody to talk to, I think, is key, is because I think a lot more tools going to come online in a very near future, is because a lot of startup and businesses and seeing opportunity in that. And then I think some of the big consulting companies already doing it too. So I'm sorry, we got to be careful with those. But again, I want to go back. Prior to the NIST cybersecurity framework, there is actually NSA CAE. You got to go look at the NSA CAE, the Center of Excellence, right? They have knowledge units. If you really wanted to look at, hey, I know this, do I have a hole in my understanding? Go look at a knowledge unit on the particular knowledge base in a particular area and look at, hey, how are you coming along with
Mm-hmm.
the long list? But you got to be careful. The way I look at standard and framework, right, it could be a problem, is because we are telling our adversary how our people are thinking, right? You can see I'm saying that there's a threat, right? So you're just telling our adversary how we are training our workforce, how they think, right? So I have a mixed feeling about that. I think it's going to get a baseline in terms of waterline. It's going to be much higher than it used to be. But I'm afraid that we are going to be producing a set of workforce that is homogeneous thinking. You know how dictatorship go, right? Dictatorship, when you become a dictator, you always get rid of people that can think the way you think. You want them to be submissive to you and then keep thinking the way you do. What I'm afraid of, we're going to lose that heterogeneous thinking, right? And then it's not going to get ourselves and our organization and nation as a whole to get us out of some of the trouble that we are walking ourselves into. So just a little mindful.
And I'd like to add a little more on the idea of a mentor, because there's some feedback that I get from a lot of people just getting started where they say, I can't find a mentor. And if you just cold call a cybersecurity company and say, I want to shadow one of your people, they're going to say no, right? A lot of times they have information that they can't share, and a lot of them are very guarded. And so it can be difficult to find a mentor. If you don't have anybody that's out there, I want to recommend a great resource. This is a company that we're not affiliated with, but Black Hills Information Security.
Oh, yeah.
They're a great organization. They have a community manager, Jason Blanchard, who genuinely cares about the community and wants to help people get into cybersecurity. Join their mailing list, attend their webinars, because they do a great job of serving as a mentor, and they're very friendly and open. So there are mentors out there. You just have to look and find.
Yeah, I want to add on to that too, is go look up community colleges and university, and somebody potentially are teaching and doing things that you might be interested in. Okay. and reach out to them. Well, some of them will be nice to you, some of them are completely mean to you, but that's how lives are, right? So go talk, because ultimately, right, is having that person to is spending a few minutes with that person is going to bring up things to you that you can be paying attention to, and things that you can continue learning and researching on. So I joke about it, come spend a few minutes with a doctor can really fix you up in terms of things that you can be thinking about and doing.
Absolutely. And that's a great point. The mentor, I think that's something that's severely lacking and definitely needed. So I think we got time for one last question. And one of them has to do with kind of around, the statistics. I don't think we really threw out a bunch of statistics. Now we could pull them from several different places, but I think some of the statistics that I always looked at in terms of the skills gap are kind of skewed. I don't think they're really, I've looked at them like, it's not really reflective of what I've seen or what in my area. But I'd love for you guys to be able to kind of talk about, where really is the hardcore skills gap, that you guys are seeing from an industry level. We could have gone there and did the obligatory, here's, Department of Labor says this is what we're seeing, all that stuff. But, can you guys really hone on like, I think you mentioned, like bring somebody in a room and let's we're the analysts, how they can think. But, what are some of those really kind of, what's the real need that we're seeing in here? Where's the one? And again, this is more geared towards more the intro and then the junior level people.
Sure. I can throw one out right now, which is super important. I mentioned end user cybersecurity training, which everyone in a company needs, from the mail clerk all the way up to the CEO. Everyone in the IT department, they all need basic cybersecurity awareness training. The IBM Threat Intelligence Index, they put out statistics on breaches and so on, that 95% of cyber attacks contain where human error was a contributing factor, right? A human in the organization was what led to the bulk of cybersecurity incidents. That shows how much we need this training spread throughout an organization when it's that level of impact. And just the training and remediation costs, right? That in the industry, right now, training budgets in 2022 exceeded $100 billion. That sounds like companies are paying a lot on training, right?
Wow.
$100 billion. But there's and these are facts, not my made up stuff like normal. The 2022 Poneman Cost of Insider Threats report stated that let's see, it was a security incidents cost companies $8 trillion. $8 trillion. So that $100 billion in training, all of a sudden, just a drop in the bucket considered or compared to that cost. Those are some of the numbers that are out there that companies are looking at and saying, wait a minute, we've got to do a better job making sure that our team is prepared and has the resources to protect us.
Yeah, good. I think unfortunately, we're out of time. A couple of things I do want to mention. Some of apparently the Department of Labor does have an apprenticeship program noted for cyber, which is a great place. And there's also the private ones. We mentioned the Black Hills Security out of South Dakota is a great thing. I believe it's a nonprofit, so we can mention them. But those are kind of the things. But with that, I want to wrap it up. I want to thank so much for our two panelists for a good discussion. I think this is an opportunity for us to be able to, have a discussion about the skills gap. We know it's there. It's something like, it's easy. It's not easy, but it's something we grapple with, and we think it's a relatively easy, but it's more complex. So I want to thank both our panelists today. Thank you so much for bringing some new insight to this. And I think it's a very good information to bring to also the group. So I want to thank you and turn it back over to Margaret.
Great. Thanks, Alex. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. As I mentioned in the beginning of the webinar, after today's event, a recorded version of the webcast is available on the ISSA web conference page. And again, you will be able to print a viewing certificate on BrightTalk to submit for continuing education credits. Of course, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us at memberservices@issa.org. And in closing, we invite you to join us for our next webinar taking place on August 2nd at 1 p.m. Eastern, where the topic will be how to build an effective cybersecurity governance framework. Thank you again, Alex, and to our panelists, Don and Sin Ming, and of course, our sponsor, ACI Learning. Great conversation, and we hope you all enjoyed it, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Cheers.